in palliative care, of course, the whole philosophy harks back to the quality of the end of life, and even the quality of dying.
I think our goal always on palliative care is actually comfort, and food can be a part of that comfort, whether it's physiologically, people feel better because they've had something to eat, or more of a psychological experience of having comfort food, eating with their families, having things that they enjoy. So the overall goal is always comfort, and food can be a part of that.
With the end of life, like I said, food is not on top of the list. Comfort is, and pain control. That's the most important thing.
Patients and families, they need to be informed that although nutrition contributes to a person's well-being, it doesn't cure the disease. I think that's really important. I think early discussion of patients' goals of care is really important. If the patient says up front that, when I become so unwell that I can't eat, don't force me to eat, but I know that, for example, when my father was unwell, because he has passed, when he wasn't able to swallow, we didn't feed him. But when he was able to make decisions, he made them. And one of them was, I'm not having chemotherapy anymore because this doesn't help me. I'm in bed for a full week after, and I can't eat. I'm like somebody who's dead. And so he made those decisions. So I think while people are able to make their decisions and able to eat, they should do it for as long as they can, as long as they want to. But we can't force people to eat.
Either in the consult process, or families will come to do a tour of the unit before their loved one becomes an inpatient. And I try to take that opportunity to talk about food and to talk about hydration then, because and to explain that a necessary part of a body that is shutting down, a body that's slowing down, and a body that's dying, is that those processes also start to slow down. And I try to draw the distinction between what we think is useful for an otherwise healthy body that has a disease from which it will recover, and what happens for a body that is actually in the process of dying. Culturally, food is about nutrition, but culturally it's also about other things, particularly in our culture. That's how we love each other, is we feed each other, right? We have occasionally seen family members who absolutely, out of love, they want to keep their loved one as comfortable and certainly alive as long as possible. And they see food and hydration as a part of that. So we do some patient education as well around what exactly the reasons that we don't do that, and it's because it doesn't prolong life and can in fact make the dying process more difficult.
If the family member has been with the person who is terminally ill, and they've been with them throughout the whole course of their illness, by the time they get to us, they've already seen for themselves what the person is able to eat, if it's an enjoyable thing for them, if it makes them ill or upset. And sometimes even then it doesn't sit well with them. But the whole idea of providing food and fluids is really because you want a person to live longer and you want to make them happy, You can get somebody probably wasn't totally involved with the care, and their perspective is completely different. They may come from some outlying area or from another province and see their loved one in a terrible state when they get here. And they may assume, depending on their perspective, that food and fluids are being withheld from them. And then you have to go right back to the beginning with them and start to give information, of course, is a huge thing. So, when you're looking at all of these issues around feeding, you're looking at all the people that you have to deal with on an ongoing basis. And of course, the central person is the person who's ill, who's dying.
Family members and friends and neighbors and members of your community, they bring food to people who are sick. And they bring food to the family members who are here visiting. So we try to really acknowledge that part as well, that we appreciate this is about how loving and wanting to care for this person. And then try to provide some alternatives for how they could care and provide comfort in different ways. So, if it's not too painful, depending on the person and their illness, to massage bodies, to speak really softly, to we teach them how to provide mouth care. Putting lotion on someone's hands, we try to provide them with other ways that they can offer comfort outside of food and water.
And sometimes they may not want to eat, and it might be quite okay with them. And as you develop a relationship with the patient and family members, and it is a relationship. So if you have a very short space of time to develop a relationship, it's not always as successful. It depends more on just giving information and helping them see what's before them. Because, I've been in situations where the person is probably getting close to death, and I mean hours. And you might have some family members bringing in food and saying, can we feed this food? So you have to intervene, and sometimes you have to intervene in a way, we're way past that now. Look, here's what we are, here's where we are now. So you're always trying to refocus and going back and seeing it day by day, the continuity of that sort of, I guess you're on a trip with them, Because people are very focused on doing something, So once they can't cook a nice meal or go out and buy it at a restaurant and bring it back in. Sometimes as they go along, you can guide them into the proper way to do mouth care, because there are certain considerations for safety. But if you explain to people the proper procedures and the reasons for it, many people are quite comfortable with that. Some people aren't. But I think there's a role to play for everybody in those last days.
Sometimes when patients are unable to eat, and family want them to continue to eat and they just can't, sometimes it's interpreted as they're giving up now, they're ready to die. And that may not always be the case. They just can't absorb it the same way. They may not have comfort when they eat. They don't feel hungry, they may not feel thirsty. So I think it's important to realize that, they may not have given up, but it's just that they can no longer do it. They don't have the energy that it takes to eat sometimes, right?
Because sometimes the focus, and you help guide people from the focus from doing to a focus more of being. Sometimes you can gently guide them into maybe just being around the person. Some questions I've asked people are, well, what would you do if you were home together, if the family was together? And sometimes people have said to me, well, we would tell stories. So-and-so, the person in the bed dying, was a great singer. He used to sing all these Irish songs. And once you get a feel for what made people happy when they were together, gives you another, in a sense, a philosophical or spiritual sense, I suppose, a kind of a nourishment that goes beyond food and fluids in the physical sense. But people tend to be able to nourish each other with other types of interactions.
I think this is distressing for family members because they see changes that indicate that their loved one is declining, and then it kind of puts things into perspective that things are not as good as they used to be, and I'm not sure how long they may have with us, because now they're not eating and drinking, and they're if they're not going to eat and drink, well, we know that they're not going to have a lot of time. And I guess it's more about perception. Like if people were educated on, that sometimes oral intake is not always appropriate, then they would have a better understanding. But sometimes without that education and things that they can do instead of feeding their loved one, then it can cause them more distress.
Some people can be quite resistant to that information that you're trying to provide, despite what they see themselves. And sometimes the influence of the doctors or medical team is huge. I recall one woman in particular who was dying of cancer, and I know that it really hurt her to eat, but she would really try to do that for her family, and that's not uncommon. And one day a doctor just happened to say to her during rounds one day, if you don't want to eat that, you don't have to. And it was like a revelation for her. And later that day when her husband and her sons came in, she said, the doctor said if I didn't want to eat that, I don't have to. And now I made up my mind, I'm not going to eat that because I don't feel good when I eat. So it's liberating. You may think that it's obvious to people that if you don't feel good when you eat, don't eat it. But it's not always. It's the emotional component, all the psychological stuff going on underneath the physical stuff that you need to be aware of as well. Really be with people. I know it's really busy. I mean, I face that every time I go to work. We're really rushed. Sometimes we've got one foot out the door while we're trying to find out what we need to do here and then get out of there as quickly as possible. And that's problematic. However, if we can really focus our attention and learn how to listen deeply to people, I think that the solutions become apparent. And I also think there's a context of healing just in being with people, and they know. I mean, you know what it's like if you've been in a situation where you had a problem, you really wanted to tell somebody something. You knew if they were listening. You knew if they were available to you. Your own experience will tell you that. It's no different for anybody that you'll meet in your practice, no matter what the practice is. But I suppose working in palliative care, that becomes very vital because this is your last chance with this person, with this family. Whatever they take away from this, the people who are surviving here, will stay with them for the rest of their lives and will inform their decisions and their ideas about palliative care for the rest of their lives.